His topic today will be on the treatment of temples in Plato's Republic and Laws. So please join me in welcoming him. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I don't know is this microphone having an effect? Okay. Up here? Maybe I have to turn it on. No, it's on.
That microphone's just for the camera.
Okay. Oh, I see. So, I should talk into this one if I want to have that kind of volume. Okay. Well, I don't know that I want to stand right by the microphone, but I might if you're not able to hear. But I'd probably prefer to walk, kind of step away where I could see my notes a little bit, because that's going to help me stay on track. Anyway, I want to thank the students of the ancient Near East for allowing me to give a presentation here. You know, I was going to say, who knew that students of the ancient Near East would be interested in Plato, or you know that, or how many would. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad for the opportunity. I wrote the paper. The paper I wrote is, this is actually the title of the paper that you see, Temple, Ritual, and Philosophy. What you see underneath that is not the subtitle, but more of a description of what I'm up to in the paper. And you can see that the spell checker for some reason caught the word Greek and thinks that it's misspelled, and I don't know why. It seems to be spelled correctly to me, but if you see something wrong with it, let me know. What I do in the paper is it's an attempt to, I should say that my background really is not as a historian, but as in political philosophy. I was about to say as a political philosopher, but I don't really consider myself a political philosopher. But that's my background, and that's what I've studied. And so the approach that I'm taking to temples in these two dialogues of Plato is a kind of philosophic approach, and it's really an approach to the question of reason and revelation. And in the paper, I frame that question over against Plato with some, I guess, what I call there the fact of secular modernity, or modern philosophy. And I use a kind of foil, which is Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, and the reason that's interesting is because Bacon has a scientific institution. It's a utopia, and the scientific institution is called Solomon's House, or otherwise the College of the 6 Days Works. But the more you read about Solomon's House, which is a clear analog or reference to the Temple of Solomon, with whom Bacon was sort of fascinated by Solomon. But the more you read about what goes on in Solomon's house, it's a place that's dedicated to science, and it's dedicated but to modern science. So not classical philosophical theorizing or classical science, Aristotelian science, but the effort to master the world. And that's a very interesting way of thinking about something that refers to the temple. It's a kind of, you could say, a transformation of the temple. And so as I thought about that, I thought that really points us backward. It points us back toward the origins of philosophy. What did the first philosophers think about temples? And so in that way, I try to come back to the question in some of these what could be called founding documents of philosophy in Plato and Aristotle. And I talk about Aristotle just briefly because, as it turns out, Aristotle does not have a lot to say about temples. He mentions that they will be present in his best regime in his work, The Politics, where he talks about that. And the priesthood, he's kind of ambivalent about priesthood. He says, a good city or the best city has several parts, and he enumerates them. And he says he enumerates several things. I can't remember the exact order. And when he gets to the fifth thing, he says, well, this is the priesthood or the priests. And he says, but in a way, it's first. He's just not. He's not sure. And it's kind of emblematic of a tension that exists between philosophy and the ancient priesthood or priesthoods, one could say. So much for an introduction, and let me just kind of then jump into talking about. I wanted to give a little bit of his.
Is it on presentation mode so we can see it? Just go to slideshow.
Oh, gosh, you're catching me at my in all of my technological ineptness.
There, now, all you have to do is hit the down button to
Okay.
progress.
Oh, perfect. Great. So I work for an online university, and we do everything online and with computers, and I'm probably the least technologically adept person at that institution. So this helps me. I've learned something new. I wanted to, though, I began by mentioning this is not a historical inquiry, but of course historical inquiry is important for trying to understand a little bit about what Plato might have been up to, and just to get a sense of what was going on, I mean, what was kind of standard for the Greek polis. And if you look at, I'm not a historian, and I haven't looked at all the sources. There are endless sources on Greek religion, but I know that one of the best historians is Walter Burkert. Some of you probably know Burkert better than I do, but I just looked at an essay of his called "The Temple in Classical Greece and Its Functions," and he gives three I guess what he calls three aspects or functions of a temple in the classical polis, and he says, just to go through them briefly, there's an ideal aspect. It is considered the house of the god, whichever god that is. And he makes this interesting point that it's not generally considered to be the center of the earth or the axis of heaven and earth. If you think about Iliad's anthropology of the sacred, he disagrees with that, at least as regards Greek temples. The oracle at Delphi being an exception to that. As he says, but generally speaking, it's not. And its primary function then is as a part of the cult of the god with whom the temple is associated. And what he mentions with regard to ritual in particular is that sacrifice or ritual for the Greeks, or worship per se, is sacrifice. It's the sacrifice and the accompanying feast as a communal practice or event. And so the interesting thing that he mentions in that regard is that the temple is not, it serves as a background, but it didn't seem to me in his account that there's anything necessarily, no real ritual associated with the temple as such, with the interior of the temple and so forth, although he does mention interesting aspects of the construction and so forth. The third thing is just the temple and the polis going together. There are two aspects of, one thing, which is the communal life of the city, of the polis itself. It's a symbol of strength, wealth, stability, and so forth. So against that background, then, we have Plato, and I'm looking primarily at two works of Plato's, and I could give you the justification for that. Plato really has one political work proper, and that's the Laws. But the Republic, it could be argued, is such a work as well. The Republic is a kind of theoretical work. It's not devoted to necessarily to practical questions of how you would go about setting up the city and so forth. You get a lot more of that in Plato's Laws. But the Republic has the benefit of, as one author says, whose works I studied a lot, Leo Strauss. The Republic has the primary function of revealing the rational or the natural limits of politics, and that's I think a good characterization of the work. But in the Republic, what do you find then with regard to temples? Well, very little, as it turns out, but it's not unimportant that that's the case. And we'll see going forward with regard to the Laws. Plato is not, any more than Aristotle, is not opposed to temples. Temples, he accepts the fact that the temple is going to be an essential part of the city. But in the Republic, there's a kind of, and those of you who know the book, and I'm sure many of you do, know that there's an early